Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, back again. During the pandemic, we've been trying to do a couple of things. We've been trying to show you how to repair reels so that if you're stuck on a reel that I may be working on, you'll see how I take them apart, how I clean them up, how I identify a problem, how I service them. And we've been moving along with that. We've also addressed some viewers' questions along the way. Things like, how do I fix a bail spring, and how do I tell the difference between certain models, or what reel is the best for me, those kinds of things. Well, today I'm going to do one as a follow-up. I just did a video on the differences in terms of why an oscillating gear, the gear that makes your spinning reel go up and down on the spool. I just did a video on that one, and then there's a comparable or a corollary to that, and that's, why does my line guide not work, and how do I identify the problem? Now, in that case, that works. In this case, it doesn't. So there's been a lot of folks that have been asking, what's the mechanics behind this? Should I even buy a level wind reel? And then if they have one that's broken, well, why in the world is it broken? Shouldn't it be working like this, right? And even though all of these reels are very different, a low-profile bait caster, for example, a saltwater level wind reel, it's an Okuma, a medium casting reel, round bait caster like the Ambassador, old school in terms of a Penn inshore ocean reel, or even very old school. And this reel could go all the way back, it doesn't, but the technology behind this reel goes all the way back to 1900, when William Shakespeare actually invented the level wind feature. He found a way to take a machine that was spooling thread onto bobbins and altered the design so that you could spool line onto a fishing reel evenly. And of course, they come in all sizes. Here's a big old Fluger Contender, almost a 4.0 size that has that as well. So a lot of folks like the convenience of the line guide. I'm not one of those, but a lot of folks have fished with them all their lives, like them. And when something goes bad, they want to know, why did it go bad? How did it break? How do I identify the causes? And more importantly, how do I fix them, like this one here? So I thought I would take the time during the pandemic to kind of explain to you what the geometry is, or the mechanics that all of these reels kind of share together, and then how do you identify a problem? So I always tell folks that the best way to fix a problem is to avoid it to begin with if you're purchasing a reel. So what that means is you want to make sure, as you're checking out a reel for purchase, whether it's at a flea market, a garage sale, you have a buddy who wants to sell you one, whatever it is, to do the complete inspection of the reel. And in this case, we're just going to focus on the line guide, but you want to make sure that the line guide is nice and smooth. So you can see I'm just kind of turning it with a single finger. Seems to be working well. But then you want to put pressure on it. You want to take one side, hold the line. You want, of course, the drag's not set. You want to hold it and make sure that it's working that way, and you also want to make sure it's working this way. And the next thing you want to do is you want to check underneath. Almost all of these share what's called a worm gear. This would be the worm gear. This would be your line guide. Inside here would be a pawl. Now this one isn't working, right? It was frozen up, and maybe we'll take that out and we'll see if we can identify what the issue is there. Actually, why don't we do that? We'll just give it a quick spray of some WD-40, maybe loosen it up a little bit. And then actually it's CRC Power Lube, but you get the idea. We'll go back in there in a moment and see. So turn your reel upside down if you're considering purchasing it. Turn it and make sure that that worm gear is driving. Like here we have a problem. The reel's turning, but the line guide isn't, and we turn it up here, and sure enough, the worm gear is driving. And that usually means that the pawl inside of here is bad. Now I'm not going to go ahead and try and take that apart, but here's your pawl. Almost all of these share a common design. The pawl size will be different. That's pawl, P-A-W-L. The size of the cylinder will be different. The size of the forks will be different, but what won't be different, for the most part, is that you will have a fork on the left and right that's going to ride in the channels here. And when it gets to the corners, that's how it turns. It flops one side to the other to turn to reverse. Now, if one point is worn off, broken or otherwise, then it's not going to turn. It's going to get stuck. And maybe that's what's happened here. Maybe the pawl is missing one corner, and that disables the ability to turn around and come back. So a common failure in level wine reels is the pawl. Well, why does it fail? Well, it fails for some reason like this. I don't even know if we're going to be able to get this open. At the risk of looking foolish, here we go, we were able to... This one's really stuck. This one came out of a parts reel. I haven't even looked at it. And I'm not sure if we could even get anywhere with this one. This is a pen assembly here. We'll see if we can pull that off and show you. I think this one's just got a lot of dirt and junk inside of it, but who knows. But there's a pawl cap that comes with each one of these. Oh yeah, so here in this case, we have no forks on it. I don't know how well you can see that. So let's put it up against this to show you. There's no forks. So something broke off in here. And that's why this thing is jammed the way it is. Yeah, you can see them in here. It's frozen inside. Now I guess that one looks so badly damaged, it's not going to work. So first thing that normally fails on these is the pawl. Now it fails for two reasons. One is that the points break, and we kind of showed you that. The other one is these pawls take an awful lot of dirt and grease and grime and junk that gets kicked up from the water. Because as you're reeling, let's use this one, it's got line on it. Line's coming through here. Line is wet. And where's it going? Well, here's your pawl right here. So it's getting splashed every time you go to reel in. Water's hitting this assembly. If it's not hitting it there, it's hitting in the worm drive and carrying it down. Well, if you don't flush your reels out at the end of the day, if you let them sit like this, there's a chance that they could freeze. It's only steel. And in this case, that's probably what happened here. So always check your pawl. As part of your routine service, make sure you remove the pawl. Make sure that you take something like this without cutting yourself, but scrape off the shoulders of the pawl to get the dirt and grease and grime off of it. And make sure it's well lubed and in the cap, not like this one was, but in that cap when it goes back together. That's failure number one. All right. Failure number two is this. You have a worm gear and the tracks become distorted. So we've got nice clear tracks here. We don't underneath here. I can see that, but you can't. What happens is sometimes the pawl is going along, the reel snags up. And when that reel snags up, the pressure comes onto the line guide, and folks try to wrench it in and fight against it. And a lot of times this pawl will just dig in and it'll bend the channel that it's sitting in, particularly on these points. So if you have a situation where you're getting a skip, or as I told you to test, make sure that you put pressure on it and that it's even the whole way across. The reason for that is you want to make sure that your channels are clear of any debris and that you don't get that skip, which may have been resulting from a broken tooth. So you have the pawl that will break. You'll have a point on the pawl that can break, and you'll have the level wine guide worm gear that will be damaged as well. Most of the time with this type of a damage, it could be what's happening here. Like you said, it could be a broken pawl. That would be my first guess, but because we're over in that corner there, I can't see if the teeth on this worm gear are destroyed, and as a result, as this thing is trying to move back and forth, it has no channel to ride in. I can't tell that. At some point I'll probably take that off and see, but right now we're kind of stuck there. So you examine your reel. Does the line guide work properly? Does the worm gear ride properly? And if it doesn't, well, you've already narrowed why this reel has got a failure. It's either in the pawl or it's got a broken channel in the worm gear. Enough said. The other failure point on these is that when you use a reel and you get hung up. Let's say you get hung up on rocks, you get hung up on a tree underneath, you get hung up on a wreck, anything for that matter, whatever hangs you up. You shouldn't be using this as a wrench. In other words, don't try and just muscle it in by just cranking as hard as you can crank to free up the line. You should, if you have a level wind reel, disregard that and either go hand line it or wrap something around it like a butt of a knife or something and use that to take the stress off. If you're going to put the stress on this reel, it's going to fail at its weakest point. Where is the weakest point? Well, the weakest point typically in these reels is in what's called the idler gear. And an idler gear is a plastic gear, and that plastic gear runs between the spool, which is the lower or the smaller turn here, and the worm gear, which is the bigger portion of the wheel. Now, typically the worm gear is being driven by a metal gear. This is a plastic gear, and the drive on the back of the spool, even though this isn't the same one, has the click mechanism, and it has a drive underneath it that's going to turn the idler gear. Metal on the worm gear, plastic gear in between. Well, I think we know where survival of the fittest is going with this one. The plastic gear is going to be the one to crack. Now, how do you know if it's the plastic gear that's broken and not the others? Well, if you're turning your reel, the line guide is not moving, and the worm gear is not moving, then you're losing the drive. This is the drive as you're cranking your spool with the handle side here. This is turning, driving the plastic gear. Wrong gear, this is a Shakespeare gear, but you get the idea. If you're missing teeth here, well, then this can crank all day, but if there's no teeth for it to grab, it's not going to turn the worm gear. So almost entirely, if it's not a broken pawl, then it's going to be a broken idler gear. And don't think that the plastic gear is a sign of somebody taking a shortcut, or it's a sign of a manufacturer trying to save 2 cents or something like that. These are actually flexible, and they're designed that way. You want to have give. You don't want metal on metal on metal. It doesn't work well. It works well with the plastic, which is self-lubricating, as the intermediary gear. So you can see it over here. This is a Penn 309. It's missing the drive gear from the worm, but this spool fits that, and you can actually hear with the click. But if you look inside here, and I'm not sure video-wise whether it's going to be any good. Watch the wheel here turn as the gear turns. So hopefully you're seeing that. I'll have to give it a better look there, but hopefully you're seeing that white gear turn. That's how it works. And if you break the teeth, any of these teeth, if you score a couple of them, when it gets to the point where it reaches the spool, there'll be no teeth for the gear to drive, and you'll be stuck. You won't have a line guide. You can continue to fish the reel, but you're going to wind up in a situation where it all bunches to one side and would need to be replaced. This is the most common failure on a Penn level wind reel, whether it's this one or the 209. This is what is this, the 9? Yeah, the 9, or the 209 or the 309. That's the most common failure in that type of a reel. It's the broken idler gear, and that runs across almost all of these in terms of performance. So in answer to the question, why isn't my level wind working, we've identified a couple of sources. We've said that the pawl, that's the little round cylinder with the 2 forks, could be broken, as it is in this situation. We said it could be a damaged worm gear, where the teeth on the worm gear are actually bent. We said it could be the idler gear, where you've lost the teeth on the idler gear. And although we didn't point it out much, every now and then you've got a bad spool gear or a bad worm drive gear. But that worm drive is a metal one, right? Actually, I have the piece here. Might as well put it in and show you. So this is the worm drive gear for the 309, and you can see how it spins, but that's a metal piece, right? So if you put metal against plastic, you know who's going to win that battle. It's going to be the metal, and it's going to shear the teeth. So if it didn't break on the spool side here, it broke over here, same thing's going to happen. If you got a flat spot here, it won't turn it. But that'll be on this side. If it broke on this side, it would be erratic. You would have that break. Again, back to testing. Make sure that you have pressure on all sides when you're cranking the line guide. But it would be erratic if you were missing a tooth here. It would be completely shot. You wouldn't have any turning if it had 3 or 4 teeth missing on this side and the spool couldn't drive it. So those are the primary causes as to why your level line doesn't work. In all cases, it generally calls for a replacement part. There's no quick fix, bush fix, or otherwise. If you got a broken pawl, then you're going to need to replace the pawl. If you have a broken idler gear, you're going to have to replace the idler gear. If you have bent or damaged teeth on the worm gear, you're going to have to replace that. And the line guide, it doesn't have any moving parts, right? The line guide is simply a cylinder mounted to a block with a bend for the line to come through, whether it's a metal line or it's a plastic line guide. Doesn't really matter. His plastic can come in different flavors, but at the end of the day, they all share that pawl, and they all share the worm drive underneath. So you won't have it not working because of this, but you may have it not working because the piece inside of here, the pawl, isn't working. So that'll help you diagnose it. But the key one here, as I mentioned, you can kind of narrow down your focus. If you can turn the wheel and that worm gear is turning, then you've identified the problem being in the carrier mechanism here. If the worm gear is not turning, if you're turning the reel but this is not moving, then you have to look inside the reel, and in almost all cases it's going to be this idler gear here or the transition piece, as we discussed. So I hope that answers the question. In addition to doing the reel repair during this pandemic, we've been trying to get to a couple of our viewers' questions. Questions are welcome. If you have one, leave it in the comments section after this video. If you want to contact me, if you have something, you have a reel apart or something's broken, you just can't figure out what's going on there, drop me a line in there, or you can contact me through my email, which is shown on the business card after this presentation. If you have a reel to repair and you don't feel like doing it yourself, well, contact me through that email as well. I do repair reels by email, by regular mail, and I'll be happy to give you the details on that. So please stay safe, stay well, be healthy. Please listen to what the folks are telling us about getting through this, social distancing and wearing masks. And one of the viewers just wrote in, said the last project preview I did, I opened up a box, and you should remember to kind of spray down the box with a bleach mixture or Clorox wipes or something like that before you open it. I do that off camera, but yes, I have been paying attention to that. But shout out, I did want to let folks know that I do pay attention to those comments, and I am trying to stay safe as well. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.